Let's talk to Nigel Pawley now, media commentator. Good morning to you.
Morning, David. Yeah, I was interested to hear politicians asking for swift action and inquiries. I think they're the last people to actually comment on swift inquiries and things, given some of the antics that have happened in the House of Commons in recent months. I think they should butt out of it all, to be honest. Interesting scenario last night. This whole dynamic has changed now, and Hugh Edwards took advice from Harbottle and Lewis, the Queen's, the former Queen, the late Queen, the royal family's lawyers. They've been involved in a lot of things. And last night around 6 o'clock, smacks of crisis management and advice, because the two announcements were made very close, just in time for the 6 o'clock headlines, which is always the ones that people ironically watch. Interesting, it's taken the heat off him, because he has now come out as the person named. I think that would have shocked a lot of people. I know his name was on social media, but 80% of the world, of the UK, aren't on social media, and it would have been a shock because he's such a loved figure. People get to know people on television in the corner of your room. They get to become like a friend. They think they know you, so therefore this will be shocking. He has been there at the saddest moments and the most joyous moments for the nation. But this has taken the heat off a little bit, because his wife has come out with a statement. It's clear that if you have mental health issues, whether you're playing a card or not, I think people should show a little empathy. I mean, you could say that he had mental health issues 3 years ago when this was happening, but maybe he did. So I think, let's have a little bit of empathy for someone, accept the statement on face value. We all have our own opinions of what the reality or may not be. But in pure terms, he is in hospital, so therefore the Sun has rowed back, because you can't attack someone who's got mental health issues in hospital. We've all seen what happened to Caroline Flack. So therefore it gives breathing space. He's not out of the woods. The BBC aren't out of the woods. The BBC has now got a lot of questions to answer, and the spotlight will go on to the BBC and also the Sun, because the Sun obviously started the ball rolling with a story which was legal, which they felt was in the public interest. But it's clear, if you look at Twitter and you look at the reactions, you said, of friends of Hugh Edwards, that the Sun is very much in the spotlight as well. From the BBC's point of view, they will now have to get this investigation done. And if you notice, there were some allegations from ex-staff last night that came out on BBC News, ironically. BBC News are in a rock and a hard place, David. They have to be seen after Savile. They can't just ignore allegations that have come from their staff of inappropriate behaviour and messages.
And I think that's the key here. That is absolutely the key, which is this is a failure of management at the BBC. I mean, you're right about being absolutely shocked. Of course, Hugh Edwards very much embodies the spirit of the BBC. He was very much the face of the BBC. He obviously turned up for all those state occasions, from obviously anything royal, for example. He also announced the death of Queen Elizabeth, King Charles's coronation, the 2019 general election, and so on. So, as you rightly say, he's very much part of every single family in this country. But the fact is, yet again, it seems to me that Tim Davie has sat on his hands. Now, whether he was told what was going on is another matter. But clearly, if you look at the timeline, they knew back in May. They made one phone call, one email. That is not a proper investigation if you have allegations these serious.
It's not. And the default position of the BBC, as it is the civil service, a lot of organisations, medical organisations and things, it's not about the individual, it's protecting the integrity of the organisation. So the BBC goes into default reputational damage. Ironically, by doing that, it causes itself more reputational damage when the truth comes out later on. So they have a track record of not investigating things properly. Martin Bashir and the Princess Diana interview from 25 years ago, which is still rumbling on. They have a track record of not doing things properly, trying to get away with it, trying to blag their way. I mean, if you were a normal guy, you'd say they were trying to blag their way out of it, which is what the BBC tried to do. They tried to actually bury these things. But as Al Capone found with the tax authorities, it's not the murders, it's the small crimes and the lies that do you. And he was done with tax. It's always the small things. And the BBC constantly get caught out by the small issues. It wouldn't have taken much to try and track down this phone call. They made one phone call and an email. That is risible. you know, that is absolutely useless.
It is, but just in terms of the organisation itself, when you have the Prime Minister wading into matters of a corporation that we all pay for, this means it's well out of control. But also, what sort of organisation is it where junior members of staff feel they cannot come forward? And so now we're seeing BBC employees, ex-BBC employees too, coming forward, talking about their experiences. I mean, clearly there is a power imbalance going on here. Many people are saying this is an abuse of power. When you're in the limelight, when you're a national figure, that comes with responsibility.
It does. We heard very similar things with ITV, didn't we, where junior members of staff were frightened of coming forward. There is a power imbalance in television, and big names. Hugh Edwards was announced yesterday, he had a £35,000 pay rise. I think it was £35,000 pay rise, and he's the highest paid presenter on television. Now, I personally think we've got to look at his family. He's got 5 children and his wife. That matter's private. They are going through hell. The victim's family are going through hell because there's a big schism in their family between the person who didn't want it reported, who was the person in the pictures, and the family. Lots of losers here. However, we've got to look at the fact that there are other people who have suffered, allegedly. You know, there's a sort of a drip of allegations. They cannot be just ignored because someone's in hospital. The BBC has got to now rigorously investigate all these claims and come up with a rational and sensible report which is clear on its own failings, what has happened. If they find nothing has happened that is, well, it's not illegal, but if they find no issue, then fine, come out with it. If there are issues, then we decide, or they decide, what happens to Hugh Edwards.
And as you rightly say, this investigation is ongoing within the BBC. This is about corporate governance. This is actually about making sure your staff are safe and secure. But also, it shines the spotlight back onto the BBC when they're paying these ridiculous salaries to people. As I said, you know, people like Gary Lineker getting £1.3 million. You've then got other footballers like Alan Shearer on £500,000. I don't know about you, but I don't want £2 million spent on 2 footballers.
Well, that's right. Alan Shearer is not even actually a host. He just turns up to talk about a game every so often. So, you know, the problem is the BBC has been in a tailspin for some time. It's in a tailspin because it's losing touch with its viewership and listenership. It's, you know, the listeners are down, they're getting older, but the older people don't have programmes for them. Fewer people are watching. Younger people are listening to Talk Sport, they talk radio, they're listening to YouTube. They're not watching television live. EastEnders is getting less than 1 million viewers, the flagship soap. Television's in crisis, and the BBC doesn't help itself by getting caught up in issues like this. You can't help if your presenter is found out or exposed by a paper. But this happens so constantly. The BBC, if it's good at anything, it is not doing inquiries. It's also not good it's very good at shooting itself in the foot, because constantly things which could be sorted drag on and become a big crisis, whether it's Jimmy Savile, whether it's Bashir, whether it's now Hugh Edwards. You know, yes, the heat is off. Yes, he can recover. Will he come back? We don't know. It depends on the outcome of this inquiry. Indeed. But the one thing I think we can say is there's no way the BBC can now just brush this under the carpet and come out down, you know, kick it down the long grass. People are looking at this, and it looks to me like the BBC News, just to find it, the BBC News reporters and the news team are actually looking into this as they would any other story if it was you, me, or anyone else. You know, so that's also is being seen. They won't be liked by some people who are friends of Hugh Edwards, but it's good that their teams look into it, and also good that the BBC do a proper and rigorous inquiry into what has happened.
Nigel, very good to talk to you. Thank you very much. Nigel Pawley there, media commentator.